If you're watching this video, it's probably because you yourself have either started or are interested in starting a clothing brand. If you've done so, you've either run into the problem or are considering the problem of your clothes not standing out. If you go on TikTok, you're gonna see a clothing brand every other day with the same exact designs or something similar. Back in the day when just anybody could really just start making clothes, like when it first became a big thing, I'm talking about the rise of like Printful, for example. Really, clothing brands did already seem kind of saturated, but I think at the time it was more drop shipping. But now the drop shipping is kind of falling out of favor. A lot of people have switched from drop shipping to clothing brands as their next new hustle. So we're just gonna get right into the video. I'm actually gonna start off at that first point. The point being that if you're starting a clothing brand purely to make money, I'm not gonna necessarily say that's bad, but you need to understand that you're probably not gonna have a lot of longevity in the game. The primary reason being that if your main core reason for starting a brand is just making money, you're going in with a lot of the things that people that actually have a passion for it have that differentiate them from the rest of the market. Because you don't have these things, it's going to be pretty hard for you to differentiate, and you might be able to get a first couple good sales with some good marketing, but longevity is something you won't be able to attain. So the first thing I'd recommend is to actually go into this if you know you're somebody that's either into the idea of owning a clothing brand, into fashion just as a hobby, or into the idea of like turning art like into fabric and clothes. And I'll get into that more later. So the first thing that we're gonna actually talk about when it comes to your brand and what you should be doing with it is like your designs. One of the things that I've really noticed among these new age or TikTok designers, as I would like to call them, is a heavy reliance on graphics. Basically, these guys go on Pinterest, find your Y2K like stars and world globe and like skulls, whatever else they have you, and all those fonts, and essentially just throw those up on like a hoodie or a shirt. Now, graphics aren't necessarily a bad thing. Like there's a whole category, graphic tees. People like those for a reason. However, do you yourself as a brand have that reason? If not, you maybe shouldn't be making graphic tees. A lot of people think that a shirt or a garment is dependent on what you can just see, like the graphics, the cool like stuff about it. But this just isn't true. You can really tell where somebody is on their design journey based on pretty much the type of graphics they use, how they use them, and the amount. A lot of people will see something and be like, oh, that's a really cool graphic, and think that they can just throw something similar on their garment without understanding some underlying concepts. So my main point, and you'll understand this as you go through these videos, but my main point for right now is that when it comes to your garments, that you should be working more on like actual garment work. So in terms of how does the garment feel, what is it made of, how much does it weigh, what is the fit, what are the measurements, is it oversized, undersized, is it cropped, is it distressed, how is it distressed, what are the different finishes they're doing on it, how is the like what kind of hems are they doing, how are they putting it like the different stitching techniques. And then if you're going to do like embroidery, how are you going to do that, what are the like the lining, the inside, people don't really think about that, but the lining on the inside, what is that going to be like, the buttons, the zippers, how are you going to do that, what is the pocket space going to be like, what, all kinds of things like this that people never consider when they're making clothes because they just throw something up on a blank. I'm not saying that you need to invest a lot of money to do something beyond blanks. However, when you do have a blank, there's still things you can do with it aside from just screen printing or sublimation or whatever else have you. Play around with embroidery techniques and how you do that, but also just remember that a lot of the times, especially when it comes to graphics, less is 100% more. So I already touched on the second point pretty much from the beginning, but the second point is that there's been a huge removal of art from the equation, essentially turning the whole thing into just a cash grab. So when it comes to art in general, it has like there's this kind of misconception to a lot of people that art is simply like drawings or sculptures or something like that. But the reality is that art, in my opinion anyways, is pretty much anything that is like a uniquely human creation that has soul, like essentially think music, think acting, think like all types of cinema, books, comics, whatever have you, manga, films, movies, TV shows, music, and clothes. These are all forms of artistic expression in my opinion. So when it comes to like making clothes, you should go into it, in my opinion, like an artist. Go into it thinking like, how can you express yourself? How can you tell a story? How can you express something that is important to you, things that you care about in clothing? How can you support a cause that you care about in clothing? If you're somebody that's really into skateboarding and that underground music scene, make clothes that speak to that. It doesn't have to be graphically inclined. It can also just be in the fit of it. Think like, for example, if there's somebody in your space that's really, really popular, or that was like super legendary and famous in the past in that space, like the pioneer, you can make clothes that perhaps in their fit or in how they're like structured or whatever alludes to that person and how they dressed or something like that. All kinds of things that can be done when it comes to looking at clothes like art and thinking of it from more of a fourth dimensional space. The next point is that a lot of people, like I said, don't actually understand clothes themselves. So what I mean is like, you don't understand the way that certain garments look together, how certain like garments fall upon the skin, how certain things interact with like different print techniques, and just all these other things that people wouldn't really consider when they're first starting out. You don't know how like, you know, like a weight of the fabric, for example, is really important. How does the weight differentiate, you know, from end to end? Like, why is the garment heavier in this end? Does that add quality? Why is it like lighter? Where is that removing quality? Like, really understanding fabric on a very basic level is super important. Understanding clothes on a really basic level is super important. Like, I would highly suggest that if you're going to get into making clothes and like making a brand, that you yourself learn how to sew. And I don't just mean repairing clothes. Take a measurement of your friend, make a pattern, and then sew that into like a garment. It doesn't have to be anything super fancy. It can just be like a t-shirt or even pants. I would highly recommend learning how to do pants, because if you've ever learned how to sew, you know, doing pants is kind of weird, but learn how to do that on a really basic level, and just through doing that you'll have so much more understanding of clothes and making them, and that'll help you immensely in your journey. This next point pretty much goes hand in hand with that last one, which is that people don't spend enough time to learn. People just go into it, like I've been saying, with the intention of making money. Like I said, there's nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with wanting to make money from the fruits of your labor. However, people don't want to take the time to invest the hours into learning how to do this properly. I'm going to tell you this right now. If you want your clothing brand to last anything longer than a single drop, a couple years, whatever, you're going to have to put in a somewhat equivalent amount of time into that. Put in a couple months into learning like just how to sew, how to like the fabric, materials, the histories of fashion, like the fashion fundamentals. Put more time into learning about operating a business, learning about operating a clothing brand specifically, learning about shipping, learning about, you know, manufacturing, learning about the manufacturers in your area, how to do things locally, or maybe why, if you aren't going to do it locally, why not? Like all this learning, and then you can start to plot out your brand thesis, all of these things, how you're going to put that together, and then you can go into, you know, production and like designing and stuff like that. It's a process. If you skip this process, you may find success, but I highly doubt it's going to be great success, and that success is going to last very long. This next point is more blunt than the rest of them, but it's that a lot of people just don't have good style. What I describe as good style isn't necessarily like the clothes like look good, because to everybody style is different. I can appreciate something that looks good or has good style even if it's not something that I would wear or that I personally like, because I understand the or to some extent the thought process that went into making that garment. Here's the thing people need to get. No one's ever going to understand every little reason for why you get dressed. No one's going to understand particularly why you put on that ring with that chain, and why that chain informed your decision of what earrings to wear, and then how that whole jewelry ensemble was decided by the shirt, and that shirt you match with those pants for a specific reason, and you chose that style of pants with fabric texture with those shoes for a specific reason. There's all these little nuances that go into anybody's ordinary fit that nobody's ever gonna understand. They're gonna understand the broad strokes and basics, the silhouette, the colors, and like the weight of the fabric, but they're not gonna understand the little things that are specific to you and particular to who you are as a person. Throughout this entire video, you've been watching a time lapse of me making clothes, and it might seem like some of these clothes are pretty bad because, oh, what kind of advice am I giving? Well, for the most part, it comes down to the fact that these are practice. This is me having fun. It's art. I'm expressing, I'm having fun. I just want to do something. A lot of these I do generally might want to make, but people aren't going to understand just looking at this, the end vision that I have for the garment. The fact that to them this is just like throwing graphics up, but they don't know that some of this is fabric, or this is made of metal, or how, like, what material this is going to be, and how I'm going to, like, you know, the end goal I have in my head. Nobody's going to understand that until I've made it. The next point is that a lot of people follow trends. Following trends isn't bad if what you want to do is get money in the short term, but if you want, again, longevity, you need to formulate a trend yourself. Like, think Rick Owens. Like, because you just follow trends, because you just throw graphics up that, you know, you kind of think will look cool, because you don't really understand how clothes work, so you didn't put the time into learning about the clothes or the niche that you're getting into, or even deciding a niche, because you didn't do any of that, you don't have a culture. You don't have people that relate with your brand on more of a level of, these clothes look really cool, I like this style. Everybody has a community they would like to be a part of, and people express themselves and their communities in their clothes. Like, that's why I say it's like artwork. It's expressive. When you formulate your clothes and your silhouettes and your designs to have a certain culture, to be something aside from just clothes, to be more than just art, to be artistic expression itself in some way, you'll have longevity and you'll have loyalty, because people that relate with that will buy from you and any similar things you do. It doesn't necessarily mean you're locked into one kind of style, because this could mean anything. It could be, if you're the type that does narrative work with your clothing, where you do stories throughout, like, your clothes, like you tell stories through your clothes, you can tell a completely different story with completely different styles of clothes and still have the same people buy, because they're buying for the fact that you tell stories with your clothes. This video has been pretty long, and for my first fashion video, I mean, I don't know if it was the greatest, but I really wanted to talk about this, and I hope you enjoyed the video or found value from it. Let me know what other kind of topics you'd like me to cover. I'm definitely going to be making more videos in the, like, this fashion sphere, so subscribe if that's something you're interested in, and like I said, like this video if you got value from it. Yeah, peace out.